Welcome to Humanist Views, a program where we look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to take a break from looking at more of the harder science, more of the serious issues, and we're going to talk about life in general, because as many of you out in the world will know, you probably know some humanists and atheists, but we're not always as out on the sleeve as other religions, but we are living life according to our values. So tonight I'm going to bring on a guest, and we're going to talk about living a humanist life and how you do that, how you take a rational approach to life and getting involved with that. So my guest tonight is Brianne Bilyeu.
Hi.
Welcome, Brianne.
Thank you.
Brianne is a blogger at Free Thought Blogs.
Yes.
And you also work, your day job is being a real scientist.
A real live scientist.
Okay,
yes.
so let's...
And now I'm a scientist on TV.
Excellent, yes. You get to play one on TV. So let's talk about, have you always been a non-believer, or did you come from religion?
No, I was raised in a moderately religious family. I was raised as an Episcopalian, so barely religious if you ask some people.
Oh yes, I had that comment made about my version of Lutheranism that I came from.
Yeah, so I was involved in church youth groups, and I went through, did all the Eucharist stuff and the participated in all the bake sales and all the church community things like that. And in college, I searched for a little bit of different religions, and then I just sort of took a break. I just didn't think about religion for a long time, and it wasn't until I started getting more involved on the internet and reading other blogs and finding websites, seeing the kind of harm that religion does in the world, that made me look at how I think about the world and think about what we can do with our lives in this world, that the labels of atheist and humanist really seem to apply to what I believed.
So it wasn't that you came from a hardcore belief, but more of just a sort of cultural, this is where we brought up, this is what we did on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. It was very much a community-based thing, more than a God thing.
Okay, and there is definitely an appeal to that, as we are finding, because with like the nuns, as we're discovering, those people who say there's no religion, we're trying to form a community that sometimes will replace some of the churchy functions, or looking for new ones, which is an interesting process for us.
I think so, yeah. I think that there's a lot of people who are leaving religion who miss that community and do need to replace it with something else. But that's never been a problem for me. I didn't, like I said, I kind of phased out of religion. I just found my entertainment and my community and my activities in other places. So for me, I've never felt that need of going and finding other people to share in that kind of community, because it's everywhere. Everywhere we look, there's always something to do. I'm never bored.
Oh yeah, and we have some interesting communities that overlap in our areas as well. As you and I are also involved in science fiction community locally too, which is quite a lot of fun.
It is.
We
very geeky.
Get our geeky and nerd sides out with those. So, but that was a process on how some people get to humanism as well, is when you start getting exposed to new ideas.
Yes, yes. I think that especially starting to see that other people think different things, maybe similar things, but different enough that makes you go, well, how can we both be right? That drives a lot of, I think that's what pushed me more into the hardcore atheism than just being a non-believer, just being a humanist. Just religions just don't make sense to me, and the facts, there are no facts when it comes to religion. It's all opinions and interpretations.
Yep, theology, which is a really interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
So have you always been interested in science, or was that something that came along the way?
I've always been interested in science.
So were you one of the ones that would take things apart to figure them out when you were younger too?
Sure, yeah. I remember in 11th grade we did the cat dissection, and I was fascinated. I was locked in from that point. And I love cats, don't get me wrong. but let's not talk about animal testing.
Yeah, no, we won't go into that.
That's a whole
different topic.
But yeah, that's seeing the science, seeing what was actually in front of me, and understanding all the little bits and pieces that made life work was fascinating to me. And I've been on it ever since.
So what do you what do you do as a scientist? Are you studying something specifically, or what's your discipline?
I am an industry scientist, so I work for a company that makes a product that we sell on the market. And I work in something called in vitro diagnostics. So we make blood tests,
Okay.
essentially. And I work on the chemistry side.
Okay.
So I work on tests that are actually sold to doctors who use it in hospitals for patients to help diagnose, aid in diagnosis of things like different diseases, things like that. So I've worked in fertility, cardiac. Those are actually the two
Okay.
big ones that I've worked in this job.
Okay.
So I'm in the lab about 50% of the time, at my desk about 50% of the time, doing reports and administrative stuff.
Okay. Yeah, because those tests are important, and I work in the medical industry, and so on the healthcare side of it, or the insurance side of it, and I know how important it is for the people who have our coverage to get those answers correct.
Yes.
And we also know that science is not always precise because biology is always changing.
Well, I would say it's always precise, but our understanding of it is always changing.
Ah, there we go. That works.
So, for example, the test that I'm working on now is something called troponin, which is if you go into the emergency room with a heart attack or with chest pains, one of the first tests they're going to run on you is troponin to see where your levels are at. It's a very important test. Everyone uses it, and we're actually working on it to further increase our understanding of it. So it's on the market right now, but we are always looking at ways to make it better because, as you said, while the science is precise, sometimes the answers are not.
Yep.
So every little bit that we can make that better is something that my company likes to focus on.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially when you're checking with the heart, because I know there have been lots of changes in emergency room procedures on that. I had an interesting thing where we were visiting my mother-in-law in the hospital. She was in the heart unit, and it was a hot summer day. I had not drank as much water as I should, so I was having a no water reaction, and the poor nurse is looking at me as a 50-plus male, watching me sweat and do that, and she's going, "We need to get you down to the emergency room right now." So they buzzed me down there. Had a lot of people paying attention to me, so I understand why those tests are important, because they need to know, is it a heart attack or is it me having not enough water in me?
Sure. Yes. Very much so.
Yeah, those are important things. But you also are involved in other things in your life. You've got the work, we've got our science fiction side, but you're also doing the activism that we in our community have a lot of people doing. In some cases, you help with Planned Parenthood.
Yes. I've always supported, I've always been very conscious of the fact that women have to defend their choices in life. And so I've always been involved with feminism, understanding the stereotypes around gender and gender roles, not just for women, but for men too. So feminism involves men and women.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've always felt very strongly about is a woman's right to obtain a safe and legal abortion. Because we've all heard the stories of what happens when abortion is not legal. Because when it's not legal, it still happens and it's not safe.
Definitely.
And women die. So the right to obtain an abortion and the ability to obtain an abortion and the stigma around abortion has always interested me keenly. And so I volunteer for Planned Parenthood and a local clinic called Whole Women's Health, and I'm what they call a clinic escort. And a clinic escort is somebody who just helps women get to their doctor's appointments with the least amount of hassle possible.
Harassment from people from showing up to just harass people.
Right, yes. So these are always religious groups, always. I've heard people say that there are other reasons for protesting abortion, but I've never had someone actually give me a good one that isn't religiously motivated. So these are religious groups that stand outside of clinics and try to shame and guilt and harass women into not going through the doors to speak with the doctors inside. And the unfortunate thing is that, first of all, it never works. I've never seen someone turn aside because of a protester. No one's ever had a sidewalk conversion or seen the light, in my experience. So these are women who know what they're doing. They're going to their doctor's appointment, and they have to deal with people shouting at them, calling them names, telling them that they're bad people, and it makes me very angry that they have to do that. So as a clinic escort, I walk with them, I talk to them, I smile at them. I say that being a clinic escort is kind of like being it's just being a doorman. It's being a very friendly doorman.
But that's a very important job, especially with
Yes.
that stuff going on, because
Yeah.
you've got people trying to prevent somebody from exercising a right to access their health care and make decisions about their own life.
Right, yeah, and all that reproductive care is, all that abortions are, is reproductive health care. It's just health care. And a lot of times, especially for Planned Parenthood, the women who are going to the clinics and the men who are going to the clinics aren't going there for an abortion. They're going there for things like birth control or sex education or even pregnancy. You know, women who are pregnant and don't have a lot of resources, even, I shouldn't say that, you know, women who want prenatal care can go to Planned Parenthood. So it's...
Because they do a lot more than
They
just the one thing.
so much more.
You know, because how they were formed was to help women deal with their reproductive lives.
Yes.
Even though some of them try to put some nefarious purposes to what she was doing when she formed it, it was basically she saw too many women not having a choice.
Not knowing how they were getting pregnant.
And yes, some not knowing and just going with the basics of education.
Yes.
So, and that, to me, as a male humanist, I do not grasp what's going on in our society when we're like reverting, like during this last political season. We're taping this in early 2013. The politics where we saw regressive things on women in our politics again, and you know, being common sense on that, it's like, yeah, we need to let them just make their decisions because as a guy, it doesn't affect my body.
It does affect your life, though.
It does affect my life, but it doesn't make those changes because being a father, you know, I saw what pregnancy did to my wife on that. So I, you know, see the concerns, you know, delighted with the results, but I also know that that's not a decision that we as a corporate government should be making for individuals.
I agree 100%.
So do you know, have a feeling for why that we're seeing backlashes to things that have been, you know, almost sort of settled, especially when it comes to contraception and sex education? Well, sex education's always been controversial, but
I think, you know, there's a lot of theories out there, and there's a lot of people who study this who know a lot more than I do about why we see these things. I don't know if it's cyclical, if it's generational, if we just I know that it's never going to go away. You know, I have hope that it's going to go away, but it's never going to go away. I think that we're always going to see these little uprisings of anti-woman thought and this pushback, you know. I think that a lot of people right now feel like religion is under attack in this country, and one of the places where they can make a stand is in the area of abortion rights and in birth control. And so yeah, I would hate to posit why.
yeah, it is an extremely complex subject, and you know, to me, it you know, wonders why one side wants to like sort of repress half the population or control them more.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just never have grasped that. But
I know that last year we did see a record number of new legislation being introduced to curtail access to abortion and birth control, and a lot of anti-woman legislation from men and women, and that's extremely disappointing. But the people have rallied against that, and that's been extremely uplifting.
yeah, we did see some rallies that really delighted me. There were some protests that happened in some states that were just like, wow, there is some hope.
Yeah.
That we're not going to keep being pushed, and be able to find a way that we can let individuals make those decisions on their own without forcing societal views on that.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I think is really important to the idea of humanism and atheism. You know, with humanism, one of the reasons why I identify as a humanist is because we are ultimately responsible for the decisions we make, for the legislation we pass. There's nobody looking down to say, good job, bad job. And it's up to us to make this life a better place, as good a place as we can make it. And things like religiously motivated legislation my reaction to those kind of things is identifying even more strongly as a humanist. I don't want God in my laws because it doesn't make sense and we're never going to agree on it.
Yeah, there's too many definitions to begin with of God, much less somebody knowing exactly
what we need to do to appease
said God, or
yeah.
understand what this God is saying
yeah.
to us.
And when things happen, like there was a case where a 14-year-old girl was pregnant and she was terrified of this pregnancy, and who knows what her actual mental state was, but she hid her pregnancy throughout the whole thing. She had the baby in secret, and because she didn't know what to do with it, she strangled it. And it makes me wonder, why did she feel, what stigma was pressing down on her? You know, could she not talk to her parents? Did she not have the support at school? Was she told that God would be angry with her? You know, there were obviously things that kept her from dealing with this in a sane manner, and she went to that extreme. And that's tragic enough as it is. But then she was tried as an adult at the age of 14 for murder in the first degree, and she pled down to manslaughter. But our government's response to a teenage girl who went through this experience was to throw her in the adult prison system, and something is extremely wrong with that.
And the full force of the law on something on that, when who knows what her situation was and how she was dealing with it.
Yeah.
That's scary. That is, that is why we get involved as humanists, working on those issues and trying to see if we can't find a way of telling the other side, yes, we accept your concerns on that. However, this is where your line is. And finding that. So, what got you interested in blogging?
Skeptic's Guide to the Universe,
okay.
which is a podcast that deals with it's organized skepticism, and it's a podcast run by a gentleman named Dr. Stephen Novella, and they tackle topics of science and very minimally religion, usually church-state separation issues, things like that. And it got me thinking about a lot of issues I'd never thought about before, and I had started to get all these thoughts in my head, and I wanted to get them out, and I wanted to talk with other people about them. And some of those things you don't talk about with your nearest and dearest, so you throw it on the internet.
There you go. So the entire world can look at it. Yes,
which seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. And I loved it. I really like writing. I've always liked writing, and it's a good place to fume. It's a good place to get ideas and input, and to build community. You know, I would say that I have people who I've never met in person who I have formed really good relationships with online, because they challenge me to think about things in new ways, and it just goes back and forth. It's a great community.
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing, and it's the neat thing about the new technology is that, the one thing that seems to make humans different from our closest relatives is our social stuff, because they share a lot of other things, but we connect verbally and socially, whereas they'll connect physically and with some stuff, but we have the language. And I think that's part of what has made the whole blogging thing catch on, is that instead of it having to show up in a newspaper as a column, it's a couple of clicks away in something as simple as a smartphone that people can carry, so you can keep up that way.
Yeah, and I can get instant responses to ideas. If I'm mulling over a problem that deals with morality or something very esoteric and vague and hard to answer, I can put that out there and get 20 responses to it, and all new things that I would have never thought about, just mulling it over in my own head. So it's an exchange of ideas that really drives me to keep blogging.
So yeah, and you cover a lot of fun topics. One thing that because I read you regularly.
Well, thank you.
That I've discovered is that you connect with your family through your blog.
Yes. Every week, every Monday.
So
we get together. The particular piece you're talking about is called Cross Country Connections, and every week we have a topic, and we all take pictures from the area that we're in or from a memory that we've had. So my mom's down in Illinois, my sister's out in Washington, D.C., and I'm here in Minnesota. So it's a great way to say hi. And it's actually one of the things when I meet people, because I've started meeting people who read my blog who come up to me and say, hi, I read your blog, and that always blows my mind. But one of the things they usually mention is the cross-country connections.
Okay.
And one person told me that it actually encouraged her to come out to her family as an atheist, because she saw that it was possible to be an atheist and maintain a good relationship with your parents and your family. And you know, that might be maybe that was her interpretation of what she was looking for, but it was really amazing to hear that, and people seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's a cool thing, and it's another way that we're using these new technology to learn to connect as human beings.
Yeah. Because I am a scientist, and I tend to think very logically about things, but nothing gets an idea across quite like a good story. Stories are very important to sharing in our human experience.
Yeah, I think it goes very far back in our species on that, which is why there's such a deep connection. Like when you see like a movie that has a great storyline to it, it draws people in the droves, or a good novel that does that.
Yeah.
So with those sort of things. You mentioned your inspiration was called The Skeptical Guide to the Universe. How do we define skepticism as humanists? Yes, because this is important, because some people say, oh, you just don't believe anything. You know, you don't want your head so open that everything falls out, but we have a fairly, you know, well, we agree in most parts of what we agree as a skeptical community.
I think skepticism is just and this is in the dictionary definition of skepticism, but it's examining ideas critically. It's very close to science, you know, the way we think about science. It's not accepting things based on just what we've heard or from illogical arguments. It's closely examining things and making a decision based on informed decision making. So skepticism it's really interesting to me, because you get to see the way people think, you get to see the way people's brains work and the way we make decisions. So
yeah, and it works as part of that. So then, you know, looking on that, because we'll even, you know, take a look at things like, well, let's take a look at, you know, the classic things like the Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and all those sort of things, and say, okay, if this is going to happen, how are we going to break this problem down to figure that out?
Yeah.
And that's the approach we're taking as skeptics, not just the we don't believe it because we don't like it sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. And skepticism does. I mean, I think that atheism is a subset of skepticism, and I know that there's a lot of talk in the community about, you know, skepticism is different from atheism because atheism is just not having a belief in a God, and you know. But I think that you can drive to that not having a belief in a God by using skeptical thinking. So I think that skepticism and atheism aren't as different as some of the people in the weeds would like to make it out to be.
True, but you know, that's how we get this, by, you know, thinking of like, oh, why does it work that way? And then how would you define, say, the scientific method? Because I know there's a number of different ways people look at that, but how would you say that as a more formal process?
As like, what is the scientific
What is the
method?
scientific method? Yeah, what's one definition on that?
It's having a hypothesis, it's testing it, it's seeing what the results are, analyzing it, and repeating it. And if it's reproducible, then you can go forward, and you know, you can either keep reproducing it or you can try to go new places with that information. So the scientific method is the way that we standardize our thinking. The scientific method is what differentiates science from belief, from just having an idea. The science helps us solidify our ideas and standardize the way we talk about ideas.
So for us, it's a very important process that we use as humanists and atheists on that.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, it's...
Because we'll even, you know, incorporate then how we look at that, because when you can't take a belief that just says, I believe in X, you know, we'll say, well,
Show me your evidence.
Let's look at where that came from. Let's test that. Let's study it on that part of it.
And let's see if when they do the same thing, they get the same thing.
Yeah, it's always fun when you do the results. That's why I like to talk about my.
Let's give everybody the Bible and see what the results are. And if you can reproduce that.
Yep. First, you got to make sure they get all the same version, though.
Right.
We're going to have serious issues there. So it's kind of the fun part. So are there other aspects of your life that you connect your humanism to?
It's everything.
Everything, okay.
I live my life without a belief in God. So it colors everything. It colors how I see things, how I do things. I was actually just having this discussion with somebody. We have a lot of people who panhandle on my drive home. And, I was riding with a friend who said, well, something idiotic about how God meant for them to be there and they were learning valuable lessons or something, and we had a row about that.
Yeah, I could see that.
That's humans. We take. I believe that we're responsible for our own fate, and there's no need for God in that, and so that's. By valuing human beings and human contributions and not placing the blame or the thanks on some nebulous, God or idea, not answering this well.
Yeah, no, well, you're still getting something out, because that's where, our thinking process can come out in our day in and day out life. When you're talking about, well, how did the panhandler get there, or why are they there? And we can go back, well, where are they having mental issues? Was it a case of they are one that, say, is borderline with a mental illness, they're not be able to get their drugs on that, or they've had bad things where they've been addicted to things and are quite recovering, but now it's damaged part of their brain so that they're not good in most of society.
Being a humanist means you're not helpless.
Right.
In the face of human tragedy and human bad experiences. We can look at situations and say, what are the factors and can we do something to change them? The power is ours. Yeah,
the power is ours to do that. So we're down to about the last minute. What are some thoughts you'd like to leave people with and inspire them to go out and become a hardworking humanist?
Play with science.
Play with science.
Learn, talk to people and get other experiences. That's the biggest thing. I mean, just talk to people, meet your neighbors. Step outside of your comfort zone.
Find a way of getting out of those little bubbles that we tend to live in, where you're not dealing with people who all think the same way.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's been great having you on the program.
Thank you. It's been fun.
There's neat things that can find out, because usually we get down the dark, serious subjects, but life is also very serious, but it's also can be a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
So thanks, and you guys can find her writing on science blogs at Biodork. It's been on
Free Thought Blogs.
Free Thought Blogs. Yes, it was. Okay, so Free Thought Blogs. And she will blogs periodically throughout the week, so you can find new information on that. If you want more information about us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can find us at our website at humanistofmn.org. We'd like to hear what you think about this program and any topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. So send us an email or send us one of those old-fashioned letters that you write and stick in an envelope. We'd love to hear from you. Our mailing address is on there, and you can get a hold of us that way. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.